What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. Today, guys, we're going to be doing a Rush Duel discussion. Yes, I'm actually going back to doing this. I typically don't do Rush Duel content on this channel unless something really piques my interest. And we actually got that, as we have gotten two separate announcements that I felt like was warrant actually doing a video over. The first one being that we got the announcement of two new fusion spells that are supposed to be in tandem with Five-Headed Dragon. If you guys remember, during Jump Festa, we had the announcement that Five-Headed Dragon was going to become in the Rush Duels. However, we didn't really have a way to be able to summon that card because of the way that fusion cards were working in Rush Duels. It made it to where it was actually impossible to summon that card. Well, finally we do have some fusion cards that we can use in order to summon Five-Headed Dragon, but that's not all, as we are also going to be going over two new Buster Blader cards that are exclusive to Rush Duels that are going to be releasing in Rush Duels for the Buster Blader archetype, which I'm very excited to discuss as well. So without further ado, let's not waste any more time and let's jump straight into it. So the first thing that we're going to be discussing is the two new fusion spells that are going to be releasing into the game of Rush Duels, and the first one we're going to be discussing is Dragon Tribute Fusion, a normal spell card and a completely unique fusion spell, might I add, that reads: the requirement, if you control a face-up level 7 or higher dragon monster, you can activate this. Effect, shuffle one face-up dragon normal monster you control and one or more dragon monsters in your graveyard back to the owner's deck to fusion summon. During this turn, monsters you control cannot attack except fusion monsters. So, if it isn't very clear, you obviously need to be playing a dragon deck in order to use this card, which obviously it does kind of make sense, especially if this is supposed to be a support card for Five-Headed Dragon. More than likely, you're going to be playing a dragon deck when you're playing Five-Headed Dragon because, well, you need 5 dragon monsters in order to summon it, so it makes sense. And for the context of this card in a dragon deck, I honestly think it's pretty solid, I'm not gonna lie. Being able to use your graveyard in order to fusion summon is pretty interesting, which is kind of what I expected them to do, although if I'm gonna be honest, the way I thought they were gonna do it is bring in something like Dragon's Mirror and make it to where you banish the cards instead. That was until I did learn that banishing actually isn't a thing in Rush Duels, which is very weird. I don't know why that isn't a thing. My guess is that there is no cards that are designed that way, but I really don't know. I don't play the Rush Duel game that often. But being able to just shuffle cards back into the deck is actually not that bad. It allows you to be able to reuse the cards later, and loading up your graveyard, from what I know of Rush Duels, it's actually not that hard in order to do that. In fact, a lot of cards actually allow you to be able to send like the top card of your deck to the graveyard, and just sending cards to your graveyard in general. So it's not actually that hard to really load your graveyard with dragon monsters just to use this. In fact, the only hard thing about it is just making sure that you not only have a normal dragon type monster on your field, but also a level 7 dragon type monster on your field, which, yeah, to be fair, there's also level 7 normal dragon type monsters, but obviously you have to at least get both of those aspects onto your field in order to be able to use this card. But if you can fill all of those requirements, this card is actually pretty solid, though it does restrict you into only attacking with fusion monsters, which is a downside, which I'm not really the biggest fan of. But honestly, overall, I actually don't think this card is that bad. I think it's a pretty alright card in my opinion. So with that being said, that's going to lead us into our next and final fusion spell for this video, and it's one I'm very excited to discuss, as we are getting the OG fusion spell into the game of Rush Duels, and that card is no other than Polymerization. Yugioh is coming to Rush Duels. And I think at this point, everyone knows what Polymerization does. It allows you to fusion summon a monster by using materials on your field or in your hand in order to summon the fusion monster. Now, in the context of Rush Duels, I actually think this is really solid, especially since fusion monsters, from what I've seen, have had more of a representation of using higher level monsters in order to be able to fusion summon the monsters. I do think in that context, it actually makes this card a lot better, because no longer do you have to actually, tribute off monsters, summon your big high level monster, and then you can go into your fusion summoning. Nope, you can just send the card from your hand to the graveyard in order to fusion summon. So in that context, it's actually a very strong card for Rush Duels. In fact, when you look at it in that context as well, it actually replaces the OG fusion spell for Rush Duels, which is, ironically enough, fusion. However, I don't think this card will be seeing play in Rush Duels. For one sole reason, it is a legend card. Now, here's the thing. I do believe that it does deserve to be a legend card. Not only is it a very OG card in the context of like the main game, you know, it was the first ever fusion spell in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But also, I just think the effect is slightly too good to where I do think it might need to have been hit at some degree, whether that was making it a legend card or literally putting it to limit 1 right off the bat and putting it on the limited list for Rush Duels, which they do have a limited list, so I guess they could have theoretically done that, but why would you release cards to just immediately put them on the limited list because of how good they are? At this point, it just makes sense to make it a legend card, but because of that at the same time, why would you play this card over cards like Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed even? Like, I know people arguing that, but I do think it is better than Polymerization. Graceful Charity, especially. Tribute to the Doom even. Like, I just think there is so many fusion spells in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I do think is more worth playing those cards over Polymerization. Maybe except if you're playing a full fusion spam deck, then I guess maybe you can make the argument for that, but I don't know. At that point, I just think you're better off still just playing the original fusion and just doing it that way. But still really cool to see this card come in the Rush Duels. I'm very happy about it in that regard, but I'm just going to be a realist here. I just don't think this card will be played because of it being a legend status. I just don't think this card is good enough to where it would be warrant replacing it over more powerful legend spells, especially something like Monster Reborn, which I know is like the most popular legend spell card in the game of Rush Duels, or at least the last time that I saw it was Monster Reborn. So because of that, although it's really cool to see this card in Rush Duels, I don't think this card is going to really be played for that reason alone. But that's going to be it for this fusion spell, so let's get into the Buster Blader support. So the first new Buster Blader card we're going to be discussing is Witness of Dragon Destroyer, a level 3 light warrior effect monster with 900 attack and 1200 defense. Its requirement is during the turn this card is normal summoned, you can activate this. Send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, then you can choose one Buster Blader in your graveyard, add it to your hand. So this is basically Emblem of the Dragon Destroyer, but on a monster, which is actually pretty interesting. And in the context of Rush Duels, this card is actually pretty solid, I'm not gonna lie. It basically allows you to get back a Buster Blader that's in your graveyard, whether it was from the fact that you milled it from your deck, or even in your hand, I guess, for that matter as well, or if it got destroyed by battle or a card effect from your opponent, or maybe you did something in order to send that card to the graveyard. This is just an easy way to get that Buster Blader back, summon another monster to your field, and boom, you have your Buster Blader back onto your field. So overall, I actually think for a Buster Blader deck, this card is actually pretty solid, and I do like the fact that this is kind of like a counterpart to Skilled White Magician, but obviously they're not going to release that card in Rush Duels, so hey, why don't you basically take the design concept of Skilled White Magician, but basically give it the effect of Emblem of Dragon Destroyers and put that onto a monster, and you get Witness of Dragon Destroyer. So pretty cool in my opinion. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to lead us into our final card of this video, which is the new Buster Blader boss monster, and that is Legendary Swordsman Buster Blader, a level 8 Earth Warrior effect monster with 2600 attack and 2300 defense. I don't know why it's a level 8. From my understanding, this is a retrain of Buster Blader, but I digress. I don't think it really matters. This card's effect, this card's name is Buster Blader while it's in the graveyard. Its requirement is none, and its continuous effect reads, this card cannot attack directly. This card gains 500 attack times the number of face-up dragon monsters your opponent controls. Not gonna lie, I'm not really a big fan of this card. For starters, it's weaker than the original Buster Blader. For a retrain of Buster Blader, or I guess you can also call it an upgrade if you really want to. I mean, it's a higher level than the original monster, but why? Why did you put restrictions on this card? Now, to be fair, the original Buster Blader was put as a legend card, so this card does gain that benefit to not being a legend card, so you can play multiple copies of this card in your deck. But why did you put a restriction on this card to where it couldn't attack directly? I mean, hell, if you're going up against a non-dragon deck, which obviously if you're playing a Buster Blader deck, you're really hoping that your opponent's playing a dragon type deck, or else this deck literally does nothing. Like, that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses of Buster Blader decks, is that unless you're playing up against a dragon deck, it really does nothing, if we're going to be completely honest. So because of that, why would you put a restriction where it can't attack directly? Like, yeah, I understand that maybe you're trying to prevent it from basically doing OTKs, I guess, but I don't know, like, I just don't think it needed that restriction. But the most important thing, more than anything, why did it lose its effect to make it to where it can gain attack points with dragon monsters in the graveyard? The original Buster Blader can do this. Why can't this card do that? Like, I don't know, I feel like that's way weirder than the monster not being able to attack directly, because at least that does kind of have a reason for it, even though I think it's a dumb reason. It has no reason to get rid of that graveyard part of the effect as well. Like, this card is just worse than the original Buster Blader in every conceivable way necessary. Now, this is not saying this card is unplayable, not at all. I do think if you want to play, like, multiple copies of Buster Blader, this is your alternative version. And I think in terms of that, it's fine, but I just don't think this card needed the restrictions on it that it needed. Or at the very least, if you're going to make it lose its graveyard part of the effect, why don't you make it gain more attack points? Like, maybe it gains 1,000 attack points for every dragon monster on the graveyard to kind of mitigate that effect to where it no longer can gain attack points with dragon monsters in the graveyard. Like, you could have at least done something to change that, but no, they just made it a worse version of Buster Blader, which honestly, that's pretty disappointing in my opinion, I'm not gonna lie. But with that being said, guys, that is gonna be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know your guys' thoughts on the 2 new supports that we are getting in Rush Duels, and let me know which one was your favorite. Was it the 2 new spell cards that got announced, or was it the Buster Blader support? Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that, and what was your favorite card out of this support that we discussed? Would also love to hear your guys' thoughts on that as well. And with that being said, guys, that is going to be it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, guys, take care and have yourselves a great rest of your day.